Our protagonist, Kamiya Soshi, is a dedicated game developer who gets pulled into his own creation after being betrayed by his best friend, who stole everything from him. It all begins with a game he designed called Last. It is a multiplayer world where players hunt monsters, gather resources, and immerse themselves in endless adventures. He constantly updates the game, adding new features that make it more interesting. This dedication pushes the game to the top, turning it into the world's bestseller within just 3 years. Today, he has just finished another all-night grind at the office and successfully updates the game once again. Only then does he finally relax. He sends a message confirming that he is done with the update, already looking forward to the next patch and the new features he plans to add. Just then, a voice asks if he is still working. Without turning around, our protagonist recognizes the voice. It is Onohara. The man flashes a smile, saying he came to check on him. Our boy explains that Onohara handles the game's licensing and business matters. From their closeness, anyone can tell that the two of them are friends. Onohara comments that our protagonist must be a low-key, overstimulated genius to build an entire game solo from scratch. In response, our boy acknowledges his own effort, but insists that the game's success is largely thanks to his friend. Remembering how they met, he mentions that he first saw Onohara back in high school. Just like him. Onohara quit the academy, and the two of them ended up working on a game that later became the world's bestseller. Onohara brings this up as well, adding that the most recent survey shows a 98% satisfaction rate among players worldwide. Knowing his friend well, he tells our boy to relax, noting that it is just 2 missing points and that no game can satisfy everyone. Because of this, he goes back to work again. At this point, our protagonist is truly a workaholic. But here's what's interesting. While he was burying himself in code, his friend was up to something. Onohara asks him about a document he previously requested him to review. Our protagonist casually replies that he signed whatever was necessary. Onohara's lips curl into a wicked smile as he thanks him for his help. Confused, our boy turns around, only to see 3 men in black entering the office. Unable to hold back his joy, Onohara says that our protagonist has served his purpose, holding a document in his hand and leaving our boy completely confused. Since our protagonist lacks business knowledge, his friend calmly clarifies the situation. He explains that our boy has just signed away all his rights to the game. Our protagonist wonders how that is even possible, considering they would still need him for future development. But that is exactly the reason he is being cut off. From a business perspective, Onohara reveals that the game is already so good that further updates are unnecessary. Our boy completely crashes out, but one of the men in black restrains him. Onohara tells him not to take the decision to heart. According to him, our protagonist's obsession with the game has been holding them back. Additionally, his constant updates do not directly link to profit, and under his supervision, they cannot even develop merchandise. Because of this, our boy asks if Onohara never considered discussing it with him first. In response, Onohara looks at him coldly, reminding him of their separate roles and how they should not meddle in each other's affairs. He adds that even if he had told him beforehand, our protagonist would never have listened. Just like that, our boy loses all rights to the game he created. When he tries to contest the decision, no lawyer is willing to take the case. Even if Harvey Specter himself were present, he would refuse. Meanwhile, his former friend seizes the opportunity to expand the game even further and gain public approval. All our protagonist can do is grind his teeth in frustration. In the middle of his breakdown, an email appears on his computer. Seeing his company's name, he thinks someone might be reaching out to help him. When he opens the message, the sender simply suggests that he should enter the game if he truly loves it. Our protagonist stares at the screen with a dumbfounded expression. In the next second, the monitor begins radiating a blue light. And just like that, he finds himself on the other side of the screen. Just like in the game, he is briefly introduced to the rules, though he hardly needs them since he is the developer. What truly worries him is his current outfit. It clearly identifies him as an NPC, with 0 skills, no status, and no equipment. Basically, he has nothing. He is certain that because of this, his destined role is to die during a monster raid early in the game. So when a fairy suddenly interrupts him and insists that he begin the game, our boy cannot help but worry, knowing he might not even survive long enough for the main story to begin. He is then told to enter his character name. Our protagonist thinks about it for a moment before entering a code as his username. It is the hidden code he normally uses to access the game during development. The fairy reacts in shock. She cannot believe what she is seeing. At first, it looks as though our protagonist is undergoing some kind of awakening. However, it quickly becomes clear that this is not an awakening at all. It is merely a special effect triggered because he had entered developer mode. Realizing this, the fairy nearly loses her composure. She understands that the one standing before her is the very being who created the game, and ultimately created her. Our boy casually calls her Leafy, and she nods frantically. The system displays her information, showing that she is a forest fairy, often assigned as a support unit. With this confirmation, our protagonist begins asking her several questions. By the end of the conversation, he learns that only he can see the system windows and access meta information. While exploring the metadata, he discovers something strange. Every piece of game development data bears his name, except for one. Curious, she asks the protagonist who the individual titled Game Master is. Our protagonist explains that this person is the one who stole the game from him. He suspects that this same individual may be responsible for dragging him into the game, though he cannot confirm that yet. Regardless, he knows one thing for certain: he cannot die in the last world. Not until he gets his revenge. So he asks the fairy for help, and she agrees without hesitation. Soon after, our protagonist is teleported to a cabin deep within the forest. This cabin is meant to be his base, currently sitting at level 1. The fairy believes this outcome is her fault, but our boy reassures her, explaining that this is simply how he designed the game. As he enters the cabin, he notices a blue stone resting inside. The system automatically identifies it as a mana stone, a core structure used to store resources and convert them into weapons or items. Seeing this, our boy immediately expresses the need to use it. The fairy is naturally shocked. In her eyes, the creator of the world is akin to a god, someone who should not require such tools. Only after our protagonist explains his current situation does she understand. He is now an NPC, and without the mana stone, he cannot gather resources or prepare for survival. He explains that because of this limitation, he could easily lose his life. He then instructs the fairy to begin the tutorial so he can safely gather resources. Later, he is seen dashing through the forest, collecting materials. Thanks to his deep understanding of the game's mechanics, after all, he designed them himself. The task is as easy as picking candy. Once he returns, he decides it is time to begin crafting. When the fairy asks in disbelief how he managed to gather so much in such a short time, he simply reminds her that he created the game. Using the magic stone, our boy begins the crafting process. After a brief moment, he successfully creates a wooden sword and a wooden barricade. Although they seem useless at first glance, our boy considers them a great success. He knows better than anyone that he is currently a trash NPC, one designed to die early during a monster raid. However, despite his overwhelming disadvantage, he is not someone without a plan. Night falls. His main objective is simple: survive the night. The fairy wishes him luck. Soon his first enemy appears. It is a low-level goblin, lacking intelligence but extremely aggressive. Seeing this, our protagonist grips his wooden sword. Even he doubts it will do much, as the weapon provides no visible stat boost. The goblin lunges first. Our protagonist narrowly dodges the attack, possible only because he personally programmed the goblin's attack patterns. The goblin continues its assault. He evades again, but still suffers a small cut. Realizing that defense alone will not save him, he switches to offense. However, the goblin merely stares at him, as if mocking his weak strike. In the next moment, the goblin kicks him squarely in the chest. The impact makes him spit blood and sends him flying. That single blow is enough to remind him he can truly die here. Instead of fear, that realization ignites something within him. Changing tactics, he chooses to flee. The goblin gives chase. Using this opportunity, our protagonist activates his trap. With his current strength, he knows he cannot defeat the goblin head-on. The wooden barricade materializes in midair. The goblin fails to react in time. In an instant, a spike pierces its chest, immobilizing it completely. Our protagonist steps forward and delivers the finishing blow. The goblin collapses, dead, draining nearly all of his remaining strength. After surviving the night, he reflects on how unbelievably difficult it was just to stay alive for a single evening, let alone the challenges that await him in the future. Even so, his resolve does not waver. He is certain that he will survive, and one day he will return to reclaim everything that was stolen from him. The next morning, Kamiya stands before the Mana Stone, holding his sword and running his fingers along its surface. Leafy soon appears and asks if he is heading out again to gather materials. Kamiya shakes his head, explaining that yesterday's tutorial was more than enough. Instead, he plans to spend the entire day crafting, especially since there is someone he needs to meet as soon as possible. Leafy opens the inventory, and her eyes widen in shock at the sheer amount of materials Kamiya has collected. In the game, materials gathered around the base are converted into 3 basic resources and stored inside the Mana Stone. The first is mana, a form of life energy used to develop people and create magic-based items. The second is element, which is required to produce physical goods such as food and buildings. The third is gold, used to purchase items that cannot be crafted. With the resources ready, Kamiya begins crafting. By the time he finishes, he has created a bow, 10 arrows, a watchtower, and several logs. Although he would have liked to craft something more powerful, his low stats make that impossible for now. Kamiya then brings up the need to acquire allies if he wants to survive beyond day 7. That is when the stampede occurs. While monsters appear every night, the stampede is a massive outbreak that happens every 7 days and operates on an entirely different level of difficulty. Countless monsters swarm the base, with the difficulty ramped up so high that even players in the full retail version struggle to survive. In theory, it is already rare for a trial version character to reach day 7. Clearing a stampede in the demo is considered outright impossible. After all, if it could be cleared, there would be no reason to buy the full game. Even Leafy panics at the mention of the stampede, fully aware of how terrifying it is. Kamiya then asks what would happen if he were to die in this world. Leafy admits she does not know, but points out that NPCs do not even respawn to death, which means Kamiya's death would almost certainly be irreversible. Still, she promises to help him in any way she can. Due to regulations, she cannot participate in combat, and when it comes to advice, she believes Kamiya already knows more than she does. However, what she can do is gather information, and that is what she vows to focus on. Relieved, Kamiya thanks her and tells her he will be counting on her. He also asks her to stop calling him Creator and just use his name, but Leafy immediately refuses. Soon after, Kamiya steps outside and begins constructing the watchtower. He comments on how inconvenient it is that he must physically place and build everything himself. Leafy confirms this, explaining that the base level is still too low to deploy structures directly from the map. Kamiya climbs up and looks out over the world. He is left speechless by how breathtaking it is. Leafy teases him, reminding him that he was the one who created all of this. Staring at the world he once built, Kamiya feels his resolve strengthen. He is more determined than ever to take everything back from Onohara. That night, Kamiya receives the familiar quest, survive the night. He draws his weapon and waits. Moments later, 2 goblins emerge from the forest. This time, he is not surprised. Combat on the second night is nothing like the first. Without hesitation, Kamiya makes the first move. Even drawing the bow is difficult, as there are no strength modifiers at his current level. Still, he has no right to complain. He designed it this way himself. His first arrow misses. Leafy explains that accuracy modifiers are not active yet either. Once again, Kamiya accepts this without protest. He takes another shot, and this time the arrow strikes one goblin in the leg. It collapses, screaming in pain. Kamiya quickly fires again, piercing its chest and finishing it off. He then leaps down from the watchtower to close the distance with the remaining goblin. From the previous night's battle, he has already learned how to stay one step ahead despite his low stats. At close range, his accuracy holds steady. The arrow sinks straight into the goblin's body. A second shot follows, dropping the first goblin that was hit. Kamiya walks up calmly and delivers a final headshot, ending the fight. With that, Kamiya successfully survives the second night, and Leafy celebrates the victory alongside him. However, deep within the forest, a mysterious woman silently watches everything unfold. The next morning, Kamiya heads out to retrieve his arrows, knowing he cannot afford to waste valuable resources. In this game, fired arrows have a chance of breaking, but if they remain intact, they can be recovered and reused. As he searches the area, Kamiya realizes that while 2 arrows should still be usable, he can only find 1. Still, he is not surprised. He already knows what happened to the missing arrow. Just then, a new quest appears, instructing him to locate the lost arrow. Kamiya soon notices a trail leading into the forest and follows it. As they move deeper inside, he warns Leafy to be careful. Leafy reassures him, explaining that she cannot interfere with the game's content, and likewise, the game cannot harm her. It turns out that the game includes a mechanic where NPCs can become allies if specific conditions are met. Occasionally, an NPC will wander near the base, and if the player completes their unique recruitment quest, that NPC will join them. These characters each possess different specialties, from combat to production, making them essential for clearing the game. With his life on the line, Kamiya knows allies are no longer optional. Meanwhile, the hunter who observed them the night before, Anemone, is hidden among the trees. When her trap is triggered, she leaps down from the tree, ready to begin her hunt. To her shock, however, the trap has been sprung by our protagonist using a wooden log. In the next instant, Kamiya appears behind her and calmly tells her that they are not her enemies. Instead of listening, Anemone immediately bolts, dashing deeper into the forest. Even Kamiya is stunned by this development. He never programmed NPCs to flee like that. Leafy quickly theorizes that since Kamiya, the game's creator, now exists inside the game world, events are no longer progressing automatically. She explains that Kamiya may need to persuade Anemone through real conversation, as they have clearly frightened her. That is when it hits him playing the game and living it are two completely different things. Kamiya begins to worry that if he mishandles things, these characters could even become enemies, since they are no longer just scripted data, but living beings. Later that day, Kamiya returns to the base after gathering more resources. Leafy asks if he managed to replenish the necessary elements, and Kamiya confirms that he did, adding that it actually helped that no monsters appeared. Entering the base station, he suggests they begin crafting immediately. Leafy asks if he truly believes his plan will work. Kamiya responds confidently, saying that he personally wrote Anemone's backstory, and the approach he plans to use has the highest chance of success. According to her lore, Anemone lived alone in the forest with her father, and after his death, she continued surviving by herself. Kamiya believes that if he can show her the warmth of living alongside others, she may abandon her solitary life and join him. Still, even he admits there is uncertainty. Everything is now off script. Kamiya begins crafting the necessary items: an iron pot, a ladle, salt, pepper, ground meat, and 2 sets of tableware. Once everything is prepared, he starts cooking, expressing disbelief that he is actually cooking inside a game, something he never thought would be possible. Leafy explains that once his level increases, he will be able to generate finished meals directly, but Kamiya admits that cooking by hand is not such a bad experience. Leafy notices how skilled he is, and Kamiya explains that he lived alone for a long time, often shutting himself away just to work on the game. He mentions that after graduating high school, Onohara used to visit frequently, but all of that now feels like ancient history. Suddenly, Anemone appears, aiming her bow straight at Kamiya. He slowly raises his hands, telling her they are not enemies. Confused, Anemone asks if there are others with him. Kamiya then realizes she cannot see Leafy. Correcting himself, he tells her that he is alone and introduces himself. Anemone follows suit. She asks where she is, explaining that she was hunting when she suddenly found herself in an unfamiliar forest. Kamiya tells her he arrived recently as well, meaning he does not know the area's layout either. He then gestures toward the food cooking over the fire and asks if she would like to join him. He assures her it is not poisoned, it is simply too much food for one person. However, before he could finish speaking, Anemone's stomach gave her away. Kamiya serves her a portion and explains that it is called a hamburger steak, made from several ingredients, then grilled. Anemone takes a bite, and the moment the flavor hits her, she freezes before quickly shoveling the food into her mouth. Kamiya smiles quietly as he watches. After finishing, Anemone thanks him sincerely, admitting that it is the first time she has ever eaten something like this. Anemone then asks Kamiya if she can have more food. Kamiya agrees, saying he still has the ingredients, but he also makes it clear that there is a price. Curious, Anemone asks what he wants in return. Kamiya answers without hesitation. He wants her strength in battle. This place is dangerous, and he cannot survive alone. Anemone pauses to think, and Kamiya adds that the only way to avoid becoming prey is to become the hunter. At that moment, the system issues the familiar quest to survive the night, while notifying Kamiya that Anemone will officially join him if they fight together and emerge victorious. Because of this, Anemone accepts immediately, stating that she is willing to fight alongside him. Not long after, 3 goblins appear in the distance. Leafy believes that is all of them, but Kamiya knows better. More are still lurking in the forest. Just as he predicts, additional goblins emerge from the shadows. Seeing this, Kamiya prepares for battle and signals Anemone to provide backup. He pulls his sword from the storage space, astonishing Anemone and making her wonder if he is a contractor of the Mana Stone. Kamiya charges forward, dodging enemy strikes. The moment he manages to isolate one goblin, he calls out to Anemone, who ends it instantly with a clean headshot. Anemone is impressed. Even while fighting, Kamiya is carefully controlling positioning and maintaining her firing lines of sight. As the battle continues, Kamiya struggles against the goblins, but the moment another opening appears, he calls for support again. Anemone responds instantly. Driving an arrow straight through a goblin's skull, suddenly one goblin knocks Kamiya to the ground. Using the momentum, he kicks it off his body, and Anemone meets it mid-charge with an arrow to the head. Enraged by the loss of their comrades, the remaining goblins grow more aggressive. Some rush Kamiya, while others turn their attention to Anemone. Anemone fires first, landing an arrow squarely in a goblin's chest. However, she realizes she will not have time to draw another shot. She immediately switches to her dagger, barely blocking an incoming attack. Seeing this, Kamiya shouts for her to fall back toward the cabin, telling her not to focus on finishing them off. Anemone obeys, performing a swift backflip toward the cabin. The goblin pursuing her triggers a trap and plunges directly onto prepared spikes. Kamiya grins when he sees the trap activate, silently praising his decision to craft them in advance. With one enemy down, Anemone goes on the offensive again, striking fear into the goblin that had been chasing her. Meanwhile, Kamiya finds himself struggling against a goblin wielding a mace. His low stats work against him, and before he can recover, the goblin disarms him just as it raises its weapon for a killing blow. An arrow streaks through the air and pierces its head. Stunned, Kamiya turns around and realizes that Anemone has already finished off her opponent with a dagger, buying just enough time to save him. With that, Kamiya survives the 3rd day as well. After the battle, Kamiya returns to the cabin to organize the inventory using the Mana Stone. Watching him work, Anemone confirms that he is indeed a Mana Stone contractor. Kamiya admits that he only recently formed the contract. To NPCs, abilities tied to game mechanics appear as special magic usable only by those bound to a Mana Stone. In other words, they consider players as special people. Seizing the moment, Kamiya asks Anemone to join him permanently. She has nowhere else to go, and he needs allies to survive. Anemone reflects on the old belief that those contracted with the Mana Stone are chosen to carry out the world's will. Perhaps, she says, there is a reason she became lost and ended up here. She then praises Kamiya's combat ability and extends her hand. Kamiya takes it, sealing the agreement. The system immediately announces that Anemone has joined his team. The following morning, Kamiya wakes early to prepare breakfast. Not long after, Anemone steps outside, and Kamiya nearly collapses in shock when he sees her. The sight is so breathtaking that any cultured man would struggle not to get a nosebleed. Flustered, he quickly turns away to hide his reddened face. He convinces himself that her behavior is only natural, given her background. Because of this, Kamiya decides to upgrade the base as quickly as possible, adding more rooms. While Anemone is a powerful ally, he knows the two of them alone cannot survive the stampede. Strengthening the base is the key to staying alive. After breakfast, Kamiya heads out to gather materials, earning praise from Anemone for his efficiency. When they return, she notices his worried expression and asks what is wrong. Kamiya admits that they still lack enough resources to level up the base. Confused, Anemone asks what leveling up the base means. Kamiya explains that by storing enough resources in the Mana Stone, they can use its power to construct buildings, barricades, and traps. That is why he asked for her help. But even now, it is not enough. He then tells her about the massive monster outbreak that occurs every 7 days, and explains that they will need far more defenses to survive. After hearing this, Anemone nods and steps forward, telling Kamiya that she will gather the remaining resources herself. Kamiya thanks Anemone for her help and tells her that he will think about other options in the meantime. Even after successfully recruiting her far earlier than intended, leveling up is still painfully difficult. Leafy can't help but wish he had a drop rate boost to make things easier. From Leafy's explanation, we learn that certain character abilities and magic items can increase drop rates and improve loot quality. Unfortunately, his trial version character lacks access to such bonuses, leaving him with no way to obtain them. Realizing this, Kamiya needs to think outside the box. He then asks her to bring up all the developer mode consoles. Leafy happily complies, commenting that it would be amazing if they could directly tweak the parameters. Kamiya explains that while this sounds simple, it is actually dangerous from a system perspective. Last is an extremely complex game with multiple AI adjustment systems running in real time. If the system detects any numerical inconsistencies, the AI immediately attempts to correct them. However, these corrections only work within the game's intended design range. Too many changes could exceed that limit, triggering bugs or even system malfunctions. Because of this, Kamiya knows one thing for certain. At this rate, surviving until day 7 is impossible. He starts wondering if there is a way to bypass normal gameplay entirely. Suddenly, an idea clicks. With developer functions, there might be a way to level up regardless of available resources. Kamiya asks Leafy if it is possible to use Instant Build Mode. Instant Build Mode is a test function used during development, allowing facilities to be built and upgraded without consuming resources. As Leafy thinks it over, she realizes something important. If they use Instant Build Mode, the system AI will not interfere. Kamiya confirms this, explaining that the system is designed to accept any changes made under developer authority. Since he is logged in with developer credentials, the API should theoretically be accessible. Leafy immediately jumps into action and begins searching. Before long, she finds it. When Kamiya asks if she can access it, Leafy hesitates. She explains that it seems impossible through the console alone, but if she dives directly into the system, it might work. Before Kamiya can warn her about the risks, Leafy dives in. Inside the system, she locates the access point and begins inputting the necessary instructions. However, midway through the process, the maintenance AI activates, identifying Leafy as an anomaly, a bug. Realizing the danger, Leafy speeds up her inputs, pushing herself to the limit. Seconds later, she successfully accesses the function, executes the required commands, and immediately pulls herself out. Sweat dripping down his face, Kamiya asks if she is okay. Leafy reassures him that she is fine, though she admits she nearly got eaten by the maintenance AI. Kamiya is not surprised. Leafy entering the system directly is abnormal behavior, and the AI would naturally attempt to erase her. Hearing this, Leafy panics, realizing just how close she came to being terminated. Kamiya quickly asks her to check the system again, this time from the console, without diving in. Leafy does so, and suddenly screams in shock. The maintenance AIs have multiplied. There are far more of them now. Hearing this, Kamiya understands that accessing the same API again will be nearly impossible. Leafy apologizes, but Kamiya tells her it is not her fault. In fact, it proves the system is functioning exactly as intended. If anything, he believes he should be the one apologizing for sending her into such danger. Still, he is relieved that she is safe. Overwhelmed, Leafy rushes forward and hugs him. Thanks to Leafy's efforts, the instant build option becomes available. Kamiya activates it immediately. When Anemone returns later, she is stunned. The base has completely changed. There are more rooms, reinforced barricades, and a far sturdier layout. Just like that, the base jumps to level 3. Anemone remarks in awe about how incredible mana stones truly are. Kamiya tells her to choose any hut she likes, but advises her to decide quickly. Confused, Anemone asks why, but before she can finish her question, a massive beam of light descends into the center of the base, forming a portal. Kamiya calmly explains that they are about to run out of huts. When the light fades, several people are standing there, looking around in confusion. Among them are a boy named Aesel and his mother, Lila. Startled, Anemone reaches for her sword, but Kamiya stops her. He notices that the boy has already positioned himself in front of the others, acting as a shield. Taking a deep breath, Kamiya steps forward and introduces himself. He explains that he has only been living here for a few days. He tells them the base is surrounded by a forest filled with monsters, and that every night those monsters attack. If they want to survive, cooperation is essential. Drawing from his own sense of leadership, Kamiya speaks with a firm, commanding voice and asks the newcomers to lend him their strength. However, this only confuses the newcomers even more. Just then, an elderly man with white hair named Sylvan steps forward and asks Kamiya if he also arrived in the area recently. Kamiya explains that he was guided here by a magic stone. Sylvian nods, saying he has heard of such a thing, but never imagined he would be summoned by the sorcerer while still alive. Suddenly, a large, muscular man named Waldo pushes his way through the crowd, loudly warning the others not to trust Kamiya so easily. He claims there is a chance Kamiya used transfer magic to abduct them. Without waiting for a response, Waldo turns to two other men and starts walking away. Kamiya asks where they think they are going. Waldo replies that he needs to check the surroundings himself, since he cannot even confirm whether monsters truly appear nearby. He tells the rest of the villagers to stay put while he and his companions investigate. Sensing trouble, Kamiya tells Anemone to stay behind and protect the others while he keeps an eye on the group heading into the forest. As they move deeper in, Kamiya repeatedly warns them not to stray too far. Waldo, however, stubbornly ignores every warning. The area surrounding the base is designed for resource gathering, but it is also a high-risk zone where monsters appear both day and night. According to the game's system, once someone leaves a base, they cannot transfer to another one. The farther they move away, the stronger the monsters become, a built-in restriction meant to control player movement. Before long, Waldo and his companions stumble upon a group of small, cute bunnies with horns on their heads. One of the men hesitantly asks Kamiya if those creatures are really monsters that attack the base. Kamiya confirms that they are. Waldo scoffs, clearly unconvinced. Seeing this, Kamiya decides not to interfere and lets them learn the truth the hard way. What they do not know is that these creatures are hunter bunnies, carnivorous rabbit-type monsters that use their harmless appearance to lure prey into a false sense of security. Once their target lets its guard down, they surround it and attack in packs. In an instant, the bunnies swarm Waldo and his men. Screams of pain echo through the forest. Kamiya rushes forward, shouting for them to close their eyes and hold their breath. Confused and panicking, Waldo hesitates, but Kamiya yells for him to do it now. Reluctantly, the trio complies. Kamiya immediately pulls out 3 bottles of pepper and hurls them at the bunnies. The bottles shatter on impact, and the pepper explodes into the air. Screeching, the bunnies recoil and scatter, retreating from the attack. Kamiya shouts for them to run. Instead of moving right away, Waldo opens his eyes to see what happened, only for the pepper to get into them, causing him to tear up in pain. Kamiya grabs one of the injured men and orders them back toward the base. This time, no one argues. The bunnies are already recovering. After a frantic escape, they finally make it back to the base. Waldo and the others receive medical treatment, and from that moment on, the villagers begin settling in. They split into groups. Some begin combat training, while others help organize the base. During training, one villager notices that Waldo seems far more motivated than before. Waldo admits that the monsters are tougher than he expected, but confidently claims that next time, they will win. As things calm down, Leafy approaches Kamiya and happily comments that the base has gained more allies. Kamiya gives a short reply, and Leafy immediately senses something is wrong. When she asks him what is bothering him, Kamiya subtly points toward Acel. In the early stages of the game, there are guidance events meant to teach players how the world truly works. Certain characters exist solely for that purpose. Acel is one of them, a character designed to teach players a brutal rule. Dead NPCs do not come back to life. During the monster attack that night, Acel is supposed to die in battle. Through his death, players learn that NPCs are irreplaceable as they watch his mother grieve. Even if players try to keep him out of combat, Acel will eventually overestimate his abilities, rush into danger, and lose his life. That is how the game teaches its lesson. Knowing this, Kamiya stares at him, wondering if he truly has the power to change his fate. After the day's training ends, our protagonist and the combat group return exhausted and starving. Fortunately, the women have already prepared a meal. One of the ladies gave a special invitation to our boy Anemone, who sat down before the girl, leaving everyone a bit surprised. Soon, everyone gathers around the table to eat together. While eating, Acel cheerfully asks Anemone about his sword skills. She admits that his swordplay is decent, which excites him. However, she also points out that his archery still needs a lot of work. Kamiya barely touches his food. His eyes remain fixed on Acel. Every time he looks at him, he is reminded of the boy's fate. Waldo suddenly grabs the boy and pats him on the head, proudly saying that he has finally become a man. Acel's mother quickly scolds Waldo for encouraging him, but Acel speaks up, telling her that monsters attack them every night, and if that is the case, then he has no choice but to learn how to fight. His mother argues that there is no need for him to fight because the adults are there to handle it. However, Aesel presents a counter-argument, reminding his mother that he has to protect everyone, just like his father did. His mom then tells him that his father was certainly strong, but he never mistook recklessness for courage. Hearing this, Kamiya agrees that recklessness and courage are two very different things. If he wants to keep a cell alive, he may need a new approach. Kamiya realizes that what he needs is a strategy, one with a real chance of success, backed by courage. Sylvan joins the conversation, telling Aesel not to be reckless, just as his mother said, and Aesel acknowledges the old man's advice. Sylvian then suggests that they work together to protect the village, but suddenly it dawns on them that it is no longer their village. Just then, Sylvan asks Kamiya if there is any booze. Waldo is shocked to hear the old man asking for alcohol when they are about to head into battle. Sylvan explains that he wants the booze precisely because of that. He has decided that he won't die sober. Waldo calls this a pathetic resolution, causing everyone to burst into laughter. Kamiya then tells them that if they can make it through the night's raid, he'll see if he can get some drinks so they can have a proper toast. Waldo is the first to stand up and celebrate this promise. However, Kamiya's mood remains heavy, and Leafy asks him what's wrong. Kamiya admits that he can't wrap his head around the fact that he's the one who threw everyone into a brutal survival game. While he knows it's necessary to create the ultimate game, Leafy reminds him that without him, the NPCs wouldn't even exist. Kamiya replies that he doesn't want to be a trash creator, someone who creates life but refuses to take responsibility for it. By evening, Kamiya gathers everyone and informs them that another monster raid is expected. Because of this, they need to review their formation and prepare more carefully. Those who won't be participating in combat are instructed to keep watch from inside the base and monitor the perimeter. Kamiya explains that monsters usually attack from one direction, but he doesn't want anyone to get careless, so everyone must stay alert. As for the combatants, the three most skilled archers will form an archery squad, led by Anemone. The remaining fighters are told to pick up their swords and move to the front, where they'll work in pairs. One pair will act as guards in front of the archery squad, while Waldo's group will hold the front lines with their respective partners. Waldo is thrilled when he hears this, and can't wait to jump into action. Curious, he asks Kamiya who his partner will be. Kamiya answers that Aesel will be fighting with him. This shocks both Aesel and his mother, who immediately protests, saying that Aesel can't just jump into combat like that. Kamiya calmly tells her that he understands her concern, but staying in the back doesn't guarantee safety. If the boy is willing and capable of fighting, then the sooner he starts, the stronger he'll become, and that increases his chances of survival. Even so, she remains worried, but Kamiya assures her that he will do everything in his power to protect the boy. In reality, Kamiya is deliberately placing Aesel on the front lines to predict the enemy's movements, knowing that the system AI will try to manipulate events to ensure his death. While there's no guarantee this will work, Kamiya believes that risks must be taken if he's going to overturn a scripted fate. Anemone then reassures the woman, telling her that she can trust Kamiya's combat abilities. Kamiya adds that he won't force Aesel to fight unless he's willing, but before he can finish, Aesel jumps up and declares that he is ready. He wants to become strong, just like his father. With everything decided, Kamiya delivers a short motivational speech to prepare everyone mentally for the battle ahead. As night falls, he receives the fourth day's quest, Survive the Night Once Again. Soon after, the raid begins, and everything unfolds according to plan. Kamiya instructs Leafy to keep a close eye on Aesel and report immediately if anything goes wrong. Anemone takes position in the watchtower with her squad and orders them to fire at the goblins. She tells them that perfect aim isn't necessary. What matters is breaking the enemy's formation. As the goblins scatter under the arrow barrage, Kamiya and the assault team move in to deal with the isolated enemies. He orders them to eliminate the goblins one by one, warning them not to break their pairs so they can maintain their numerical advantage. He also tells Waldo to ensure that no enemies get close to the watchtower. It soon becomes clear that the number of monsters has increased, likely due to the rise in the base's level. Even so, despite this being their first real battle, the fighters are holding their ground surprisingly well. The fighters maintain their two-man cells, preventing the enemies from coordinating before swiftly finishing them off. Waldo is the most excited among them, charging straight at the goblins and cutting them down with ease. While engaging one goblin, Waldo notices that it is staring in another direction. He takes advantage of the opening and strikes it down, mocking the creature for letting its guard down. What Waldo doesn't realize is that the system has already intervened, redirecting the goblin's priority toward eliminating Acel. The battle continues smoothly at first, and thanks to the traps they set up beforehand, the group manages to thin the enemy ranks significantly. Kamiya also observes that the goblin's movements are easy to predict, largely due to Acel's presence. However, the game world refuses to let things remain that simple. Suddenly, the goblins grow stronger and far more aggressive. Anemone notices their strange movement patterns and immediately leaps down from the watchtower to join the fight on the ground. Leafy stays close to Acel, but soon spots goblins attempting to flank Kamiya and quickly shouts a warning. Before Kamiya can turn around, the goblins knock Acel to the ground. Kamiya panics at the sight and yells at him to get back up. One goblin moves in for a killing blow, but Anemone fires an arrow straight through its eye, stopping the attack. To her shock, the goblin pulls out the arrow and ignores her completely. Anemone quickly realizes that the goblins are no longer reacting to her presence, which is highly unusual given their normal behavior. Meanwhile, Waldo is still enjoying himself in the fight until one goblin suddenly hurls him away. He is completely stunned by the sudden display of strength. Acel freezes in fear, but Kamiya screams at him to get up and draw his sword. Just as Acel is about to be killed, Kamiya rushes in and blocks the attack. Kamiya struggles against the goblin and begins to suspect that this is the system's way of ensuring Acel's death. During the clash, the goblin pierces Kamiya's shoulder with its sharp claws, causing him to cry out in pain. Another goblin seizes the opening to strike Acel, but Anemone intervenes once again, slashing the creature and forcing it back. As the goblin tries to rise, an enraged Waldo charges in and smashes it to the ground, commenting on how easy it is to fight goblins due to their humanoid bodies. Kamiya orders Waldo and Anemone to draw the goblins away. Waldo immediately tackles one and brutally beats it down, while Anemone supports the group by firing arrows and shouting for everyone to push the goblins back. Soon, Kamiya finds himself locked in combat with another goblin and yells at Acel to strike it. Acel freezes in fear, but Kamiya reminds him that this moment will determine his fate. He tells Acel that if he wants to live, he has to fight. Kamiya asks whether he truly wants to grow strong like his father, and those words finally ignite Acel's resolve. Gathering his courage, Acel strikes the goblin on the head, giving Kamiya the opening he needs to drive his sword into the creature's neck and finish it off. Kamiya praises Acel for his bravery and tells him that only a few enemies remain. With renewed momentum, Kamiya and his group intensify their assault and eventually eliminate the remaining goblins. The battle ends after a long and exhausting struggle, leaving their swords badly worn. As dawn breaks, the villagers rejoice, and Kamiya receives a system notification congratulating them on surviving the fourth day. They return to the base where Acel immediately runs into his mother's arms. Kamiya feels relieved, knowing he successfully overturned Acel's fate, and becomes determined to overcome the upcoming stampede without losing anyone. However, unknown to him, the game world always demands its price. Soon after, Kamiya upgrades the base to level 5. The villagers are amazed by the drastic changes, and Sylvian finally witnesses the true power of the magic stone. The upgrade is made possible by the monsters they defeated and the supplies gathered from the forest, all of which accumulate as resources within the magic stone. By exchanging these resources, the base can be strengthened, which in turn accelerates the residents' growth. Kamiya explains that simply upgrading the base isn't enough. True strength only comes through training and experience. He urges everyone to finish their tasks quickly so they can return to their regular training routine after breakfast. Thanks to instant build mode, Kamiya secures a substantial amount of early game personnel and equipment. With improved coordination, the group survives 2 more raids, and every NPC shows noticeable growth. Even Acel begins improving at a remarkable pace. Since then, the AI no longer targets Acel directly. Before they realize it, the 7th day arrives, the day they must face the stampede. Early that morning, Acel's mom finds Kamiya tending to their damaged swords and informs him that breakfast is ready. Kamiya thanks her, and she asks what he is doing. He explains that he is sorting out weapons with low durability. Since tonight marks the stampede, he believes it would be fatal if swords were to break in the middle of battle. To identify the weaker weapons, Kamiya ties red strings around them and warns a passing fighter not to use any sword marked with red, urging him to spread the message to everyone else. Afterward, Acel's mom reminds him about breakfast, but Kamiya declines, saying he still needs to inspect the traps first. That evening, he gathers everyone together and announces that they have finally reached the 7th day, the day the stampede occurs. He warns them that the scale of this invasion may be larger than anything they have faced before. Kamiya instructs those staying inside the base to arm themselves so they can defend it from within. He then explains that they will use a compact formation to avoid being overwhelmed by the enemy's numbers. He lays out the formation, placing himself on the front lines, with Waldo positioned behind him and Anime stationed at the rear to provide long-range support. Once everything is set, he orders the fighters to move out and reminds them to double-check their weapons. However, Acel ends up holding one of the weak swords, as he never received the warning. Despite this, he joins Kamiya on the front lines as everyone prepares for battle. Kamiya orders the gates to be closed, and Acel's mom along with the other residents take position behind them, weapons in hand, ready to defend the base from the inside. When she stands up to check on her son and is horrified to see that Acel is holding one of the low-durability weapons. Moments later, massive numbers of goblins emerge from the forest, their expressions filled with bloodlust. The notification bar turns red as Kamiya receives a warning about a large-scale invasion. Their objective remains the same: survive the stampede. But the most concerning issue is Acel's fragile weapon. As the horde advances, one villager begins to tremble, muttering about the sheer number of goblins. Kamiya immediately rallies everyone, telling them not to flinch, reminding them that they have been preparing for this very day. He then orders Anemone to fire the flaming arrows. Anemone and the other archers release their shots, and the arrows erupt into massive explosions, incinerating clusters of goblins and shaking the battlefield. Waldo and the other fighters cheer, calling it the best fireworks they have ever seen. It becomes clear that Kamiya deliberately leveled up in advance to unlock gunpowder production. Although the landmine design is simple, he is confident it is more than enough to deal with a pack of brainless goblins. He then warns everyone to stay alert, as this is far from over. Soon, more goblins pour out of the forest, looking even more furious than the first wave. However, Kamiya and his squad show no fear, cutting down the charging enemies with ease. From the watchtower, Anemone orders her squad to leave the goblins on the ground to the close combat fighters, while they focus on threats approaching from the rear. Despite their efforts, the goblin numbers continue to grow, and some manage to reach the fence. Fortunately, the residents defending from behind the barrier are able to repel them. Kamiya and his men maintain the upper hand as more goblins fall into the prepared traps. Confident, Kamiya praises his team, believing they may actually turn the tide of the battle. Before he can finish speaking, a deep, disturbing sound echoes across the battlefield, and the ground begins to shake. From the watchtower, Anemone screams a warning to Kamiya, telling him that something massive is approaching. Moments later, a terrifying giant goblin emerges from the forest, leaving Kamiya frozen in shock. What appears before them is a goblin lord, a high-ranking goblin subspecies with overwhelming power. Its roar energizes the surrounding goblins, granting them a temporary boost in strength. Kamiya can hardly believe what he is seeing. A goblin lord should not appear during the very first stampede. As if that weren't enough, the monster arrives with even more goblins in tow. The goblins grow noticeably stronger, and Acel's mom spots her son struggling against one of them. Fear grips her as she realizes how dangerous the situation has become. While the others continue fighting at the fence, she leaves her position. Suddenly, one goblin breaks through, and Kamiya shouts a warning to everyone. Realizing that the situation is spiraling out of control, Anemone orders her squad to abandon the watchtower. She jumps down safely, but one of her teammates lands poorly and screams in pain. Anemone drags him toward the people behind the fence, so they can treat his injuries. As she does so, Acel's mom rushes past her with a sword in hand. Anemone immediately shouts at her, demanding to know where she thinks she's going, as she is already charging toward the front lines. Acel's mom doesn't get far before she suddenly runs straight into a goblin. She freezes in fear, and just before the goblin can reach her, Anemone takes it down with a precise arrow straight to the head. Anemone then storms up to Acel's mom, demanding to know what she was thinking. She quickly explains that she needed to deliver the sword she was holding to Acel, because his current weapon has dangerously low durability. Hearing this revelation, Anemone is stunned but insists on taking on the task. However, they are constantly swarmed by goblins, making it impossible to carry it out. Because of this, she has no choice but to hold them off. She instructs Asel's mother to move while she provides cover, preventing any goblins from getting close. Anemone successfully diverts the goblin's attention toward herself. However, she soon realizes that the situation is about to take a serious turn for the worse. By now, the fighters on the front lines are already struggling. None of them expected the goblins to suddenly grow stronger. Kamiya quickly explains that the Goblin Lord is the source of the problem. One of them is shocked that a high-level goblin would appear during a Day 7 stampede. Soon, several fighters find themselves directly facing the Goblin Lord as it raises its massive weapon, preparing to crush them. They raise their shields to block the attack, but the sheer force of the blow is overwhelming, crushing nearby goblins as collateral damage. The impact sends several fighters flying backward, and Kamiya shouts to ask if they can still stand. To his surprise, Asel and one other fighter step forward to support him. The Goblin Lord prepares another strike and swings its massive mace at Kamiya. Just before the blow lands, something clicks in Kamiya's mind, and he successfully parries the attack, shocking everyone present. Kamiya can't help but celebrate internally. While parrying is a basic game mechanic, executing it in real life is utterly terrifying. The Goblin Lord feels the impact of the parry and becomes enraged. It lets out a thunderous roar, urging its subordinates to press forward. Asel and the others immediately move to shield Kamiya, telling him they'll hold the line and leave the Goblin Lord to him. They urge him to finish it quickly, as they are already running out of stamina. Kamiya charges forward, parrying another attack from the Goblin Lord. He knows a prolonged battle would be disastrous, so he needs to end this as fast as possible. Just then, he hears Leafy calling his name and orders her to bring up the ring console. Leafy complies and opens it, revealing that the AI balancing feature is currently active. Leafy asks why he needs the console, and Kamiya points out that the ring modifier is enabled. On top of that, the generation AI is overloaded, meaning he can trigger all critical hits. Leafy is confused, as she doesn't understand what all critical means. Kamiya explains that a critical hit ignores defense and deals double damage, but these are usually decided by random number generation, essentially like rolling dice to determine probability. However, the game contains a long-standing bug that was never fixed. If a player successfully parries 15 consecutive attacks, the AI attempts to rebalance the RNG due to abnormally low hit rates. This adjustment overloads the system's memory, causing the RNG to freeze. The result is that all attacks become guaranteed critical hits. Leafy is stunned by this revelation, but Kamiya sees it as their way out. The reason the bug was never fixed is simple. Parrying 15 attacks in a row was considered nearly impossible, even during playtesting. However, with his life on the line, Kamiya set his goal to execute 15 consecutive parries. He deliberately baits the Goblin Lord into attacking and parries the strike. He repeats this again and again, counting each successful deflection. Seeing this, Asel believes Kamiya is being overwhelmed and shouts his name, but Kamiya tells him not to worry, he has a plan. At that moment, Asel's mom reaches the front lines and sees her son struggling against a goblin. Meanwhile, Kamiya continues taunting the Goblin Lord while carefully parrying each attack. He reaches 13 and knows that if he maintains this momentum, he'll succeed. Suddenly, one goblin breaks free from Asel and charges toward Kamiya just as he completes the 14th parry. Asel immediately gives chase and leaps in front of Kamiya, striking the goblin on the head. Unfortunately, his sword shatters on impact, leaving him completely exposed. Before the goblin can retaliate, his mom comes through at the perfect moment, throwing a replacement sword to Asel. Catching it mid-motion, Asel cuts down the goblin in a single strike. At the same time, Kamiya completes the 15th parry. He smiles as the system locks in. He has finally achieved what he was aiming for. He declares that everything will be over in seconds, then dashes straight toward the Goblin Lord. Kamiya unleashes a flurry of high-speed slashes, carving through the Goblin Lord's body before delivering the final blow straight to its neck. He leaps off the collapsing monster and lands cleanly, striking a dramatic landing just to farm aura. With its body riddled with critical wounds, the Goblin Lord crashes to the ground with a thunderous thud. Seeing this, the remaining goblins realize they no longer stand a chance. Without hesitation, the remaining goblins turn tail and flee, abandoning the battlefield entirely. Waldo and the others stare in disbelief as they realize that Kamiya has actually defeated the massive, terrifying goblin. Asel and his mom stand close to the fallen monster, smiles of victory on their faces. Unfortunately, they don't realize that the Goblin Lord is not completely dead. Using the last of its remaining strength, the creature suddenly lunges toward Aesel. His mom reacts instantly, throwing herself in front of her son to protect him. She is struck by the Goblin Lord's claws. Kamiya freezes in shock. He never expected the monster to still be capable of moving. He immediately rushes forward and delivers the final blow, completely ending the Goblin Lord once and for all, but it's already too late. Asel's mom's chest has been torn open, and Kamiya can only watch as Asel collapses beside her, crying out in anguish. With her final breath, she tells her son that she is going to reunite with his father and asks him to keep telling her lots of stories. With those words, Rhea passes away, and Asel lets out a heart-wrenching scream. Everyone stands in painful silence as he mourns his mother. Just then, the system notification appears, congratulating them for clearing the Stampede quest. It is a victory soaked in tears. The next morning, Kamiya is seen standing quietly before Asel Mom's grave. Leafy joins him and explains that she still can't determine why the Goblin Lord appeared. There is no record of any changes being made to the game's settings. She adds that although Kamiya no longer holds Game Master authority, he still retains permission to tweak minor system parameters. Leafy continues talking until she realizes Kamiya isn't listening. At last, Kamiya speaks, admitting that he had become arrogant. Because he created the game, he assumed he understood everything about it. That confidence made him believe he could handle anything thrown his way. In the end, he blames himself for Rhea's death. She was never supposed to die. Leafy tries to comfort him, reminding him that the base would have been completely wiped out if not for his brilliance. She tells him that the NPCs who are still alive owe their lives to him. Kamiya agrees that they survived, but he can't shake the guilt. After all, he is the one who created them, and the one who left them to suffer in this world. Overwhelmed, Kamiya walks away and tells Leafy that he needs some time alone. A short while later, Anemone finds him sitting by himself. She asks what he's doing, but he refuses to answer. Without another word, Anemone raises her bow and shoots down a bird flying overhead. Kamiya flinches in shock, and Anemone uses this moment to explain that in this world, survival always comes at a cost. Sometimes they take lives, and sometimes their own lives are taken. She doesn't believe it's anyone's fault. This is simply the reality they live in. Kamiya wants to argue but can't find the words. It's truly remarkable that she is explaining this to the one who created the world in the first place. Seeing that he's still broken, Anemone tells him to follow her. There's something she wants to show him. She leads him to the training grounds, where Kamiya is stunned to see Asel already training. Not only that, but he's training intensely, showing no sign of someone who just lost his mother. Anemone explains that Asel has been there since after the funeral. Kamiya is shocked. Anemone adds that Asel said he wants to have plenty of stories to tell his mother, and that's why he's determined to become stronger. Just then, the person sparring with Asel asks for a break. Asel turns around and is stunned to see Kamiya. He immediately runs over, smiling, and asks him to spar. He tells Kamiya that he wants to grow stronger so he can tell his mother many stories, and because of that, he's not ready to fall. Those words hit Kamiya deeply. He agrees, saying, Asel is right. Picking up a sword, Kamiya tells him that he won't be holding back. Asel accepts the challenge without hesitation and charges forward. In that moment, Kamiya finally lets go of his despair. He realizes that the NPCs are truly alive, stronger and more resilient than he ever imagined. Determined not to hold them back, he resolves to show them a way of life they can be proud of. Elsewhere, deep in the forest near the base, two dwarves, a master and his apprentice, are traveling together. The master picks up a bent arrow from the ground and senses traces of mana within it, concluding that it was crafted using a magic stone. The apprentice is shocked, and the master tells him that they may have finally found a lead. Before long, the two approach the village. As the villagers go about their daily routines, the dwarves suddenly arrive at the gate. Leafy informs Kamiya of their presence, but he doesn't seem surprised, as though he had been expecting them. The dwarven master, Dorn, immediately demands to meet the village leader. His apprentice, Ginger, tries to calm him, saying that a little politeness wouldn't hurt. Kamiya then appears at the gate and tells Dorn that he is the person he's looking for. Dorn wastes no time and bluntly asks Kamiya if he possesses a magic stone. Ginger is horrified by his master's lack of tact and quickly explains that they are traveling dwarves in search of rare materials. He adds that they heard rumors of a magic stone in the village and were hoping Kamiya might allow them to see them. Kamiya tells the two dwarves that they were just about to have dinner and suggests they join them so they can continue the discussion over a meal. Ginger eagerly accepts the invitation, clearly excited, while Dorn remains indifferent. A few minutes later, everyone is seated at the table, and Ginger is completely overwhelmed by everything around him. Kamiya already knows that the two are craftsmen, and he understands that if he can recruit them, he would be able to handle base upgrades and develop magic tools and weapons that he cannot create on his own. As they eat, Kamiya asks Dorn if he is interested in the Mana Stone, to which Dorn replies that he is, since his master isn't a chatty type. Ginger explains that they are actually traveling in search of a legendary material known as the Philosopher's Stone. According to him, the Philosopher's Stone is widely considered a myth, yet many believe it truly exists. Even today, there are weapons in circulation that were reportedly forged using it. However, despite the dwarves' long lifespans, none of them has ever actually seen the stone. As craftsmen, Ginger says, it is the ultimate rare material, one they must obtain at all costs. Deep down, Kamiya knows that an item related to the Philosopher's Stone exists within the Sage's book, but it is locked behind a special high-level raid quest that is impossible to obtain through normal gameplay. In other words, Kamiya is the only one who can access it. The stone itself is not merely mana, but a representation of the relationship between power. With this in mind, he asked why the dwarves wanted to see the magic stone. Ginger replied that the magic stone, sometimes referred to as Arcanite, is extremely rare, and she understood why it was important to the village. However, the dwarves only wanted to see the mana stone purely for reference. Since they have no intention of taking it, Kamiya sees no issue and agrees to show them the stone. However, he makes one condition: they must forge weapons for the village in exchange. He explains that monsters attack almost every night, and to protect his people, they desperately need high-quality equipment. Considering the request reasonable, Dorn agrees. After they finish eating, Kamiya leads them to the cabin and shows them the mana stone. After inspecting it, Dorn suddenly berates Kamiya, saying that this is not what he is looking for. Kamiya is shocked when Dorn immediately realizes that the mana stone is not a material at all, but something closer to a gate, a conduit for mana, rather than a substance that can be forged. Kamiya is impressed by Dorn's sharp insight. Dorn is correct. The mana stone is merely an interface for the system and players. It simply cannot be used as a raw material. Dorn thanks Kamiya for showing it to them, but states that it offers no clue regarding the Philosopher's Stone. He then informs Kamiya that they will be leaving the following morning. Ginger is clearly shocked by this decision. Kamiya tells Dorn that he is welcome to stay longer if he wishes, pointing out that the village has an unused workshop and that materials can be generated using the mana stone. He explains that he can provide an ideal production environment for craftsmen. Despite all of these offers, Dorn refuses, leaving Kamiya disappointed. Since they are leaving, Kamiya reminds Dorn of his promise to forge weapons, as another monster attack is expected that very night. He then leads the two to the workshop and tells them they are free to use any equipment inside. Meanwhile, Leafy worries that the dwarves may never join them. Kamiya agrees, explaining that Dorn's heart is set on finding the Philosopher's Stone, and nothing short of that will convince him to stay. However, Kamiya believes Ginger is different, young, ambitious, and hungry to prove himself. As a craftsman, Ginger likely wants to see how people react to his work, and understand the impact his skills can make. Kamiya relates to this feeling, recalling how he felt when he first started making games. Kamiya believes that if Ginger sees the potential he can achieve in the village, he might choose to stay. Later that night, monsters attack the village once again. Ginger is stunned to witness the monsters actually assaulting the base. As the battle unfolds, the archers praise the reinforced arrowheads, amazed by their incredible piercing power. Hearing this, Ginger comments that he could have improved their accuracy if he had more time. The archers quickly reassure him, saying they are more than satisfied with the results. At the same time, Ginger notices how skilled Waldo is with a sword and concludes that a great sword would better suit someone of his build. He also observes that Acel could become a much stronger fighter if the center of gravity of his weapon were adjusted. Lost in thought, Ginger imagines all the improvements he could make. From a distance, Dorn watches his apprentice closely and can tell that Ginger is beginning to waver. During the heat of the battle, Leafy asks Kamiya if he thinks Ginger would really join them. Kamiya replies that words alone might not be enough to convince him. However, from the way things look, it seems Ginger is already enjoying himself. The following morning, Ginger steps out of the workshop, preparing to leave, when one of the villagers walks past and thanks him for his help the other night. Another villager approaches and tells him that they were able to defeat the enemies with ease because of him. Ginger smiles and says he's glad he could help. Waldo and Acel then come over, praising Ginger and telling him that the sword he created was incredible and extremely sharp. Acel also thanks Ginger for adjusting his sword, saying it has made it much easier for him to swing. Waldo playfully smacks Ginger on the back and jokes that he should just stay in the village so he can make him a custom weapon. At that moment, Acel mentions that Ginger and his master are actually leaving that very day. Waldo is shocked to hear this and says it's a real shame that they're leaving. As Waldo and Acel walk away, Waldo bids them farewell, saying he's sure their paths will cross again someday. Their words weigh heavily on Ginger, and he's still trying to process everything when Kamiya shows up and asks if he's already leaving. Ginger confirms it, explaining that his master's focus is fixed on the Philosopher's Stone. Kamiya then asks Ginger what he plans to do. Ginger stares at him in confusion. Kamiya points out that it's obvious the Philosopher's Stone isn't the only thing Ginger is interested in. He explains that life in the village is harsh. Monsters attack every single night, and even with magic stones, resources are limited. Kamiya admits honestly that they're already short-handed. Kamiya tells Ginger that this is exactly why the village needs him. His influence matters more than he realizes. His skills directly affect how long the villagers are able to survive. With that, Kamiya extends his hand, urging Ginger to stay and join them. Before Ginger can respond, Dorn steps out of the workshop and tells Kamiya that they're done and ready to leave. Ginger gathers his resolve and tells Dorn that he wants to stay in the village. Dorn is shocked and asks if he's serious. Ginger firmly confirms it. Dorn then tells him that if that's the case, he must forge a weapon. Confused, Ginger asks why, and Dorn replies that he won't allow someone who is trash to wander freely through the world. Ginger must forge a weapon to prove himself. Ginger agrees and immediately begins forging. While he's working, Kamiya asks if there's anything he needs, offering to generate materials using the magic stone. Ginger thanks him but declines, saying he wants to do this with his own strength. Otherwise, it would have no meaning. Kamiya smiles at this and leaves him to work. Not long after, Ginger finishes forging the sword, and Dorn examines it carefully. Dorn realizes that Ginger forged the weapon specifically for human use. He explains that a second-rate craftsman focuses only on the object, while a first-rate craftsman focuses on the people who will use it. Since Ginger crafted the sword with humans in mind, Dorn can clearly see where his gaze lies. He concludes that just as he has his own fire, Ginger has his own as well. Impressed, Dorn tells Ginger not to let his fire burn out and urges him to follow the flame within himself. Ginger is stunned, and our boy asks if that means he passed. Dorn refuses to say anything more. As he leaves, he tells Kamiya that he's leaving Ginger in his care. Dorn walks into the forest and Ginger bows deeply, thanking his master for everything he's taught him so far. Leafy and Kamiya exchange smiles, happy that they've finally secured a craftsman. Leafy remarks that it's time to upgrade their production base. Kamiya agrees and immediately raises the base level to 8. Ginger is completely blown away. This is his first time witnessing the magic stone's power. With the base level increased, the outer walls and the workshop receive major upgrades. When Ginger enters the workshop, he's left in awe. Kamiya tells him that the workshop now belongs to him and that he's free to use it however he likes. Ginger thanks Kamiya, saying there are many things he wants to try. After leaving the workshop, Kamiya tells Leafy that recruiting Ginger was a huge win, especially considering the battles ahead. He mentions that their equipment is in terrible condition, and that's where Ginger comes in. The level up has also increased the amount of resources the magic stone can store, and Kamiya says he wants to start accumulating mana in future battles. It's revealed that Kamiya and Leafy are expecting a particular female character now that the base has reached level 8. Thanks to Ginger joining them, the quality of the village's equipment improves drastically. The villagers are now able to defeat enemies more easily, greatly reducing the burden on those participating in combat. On top of that, Ginger also takes on a support role alongside Anemone in the watchtower. With only 3 days left until the next stampede, Kamiya knows they have no time to waste and must strengthen their position as quickly as possible. On the 11th day, Ginger gathers the villagers, saying he has something to show them. The villagers are stunned when they see a large pile of clay placed before them. Ginger explains that what they're looking at are golems. He describes them as magic-driven dolls that can move on their own. Golems are essentially support units that can participate in battle alongside NPCs, fulfilling the same role as the person set as their master. If a swordsman is assigned as a golem's master, it will wield a sword. If an archer is chosen, it will use a bow. While their stats are only degraded versions of their masters, they're extremely useful for filling gaps in unit numbers. Ginger adds that he's always wanted to create golems, and thanks to their proximity to the magic stone, he's finally able to make them move. Anemone grows curious and asks if the golems can really fight. Ginger confirms that once a master is assigned, a golem can fight exactly like that person, just with reduced ability. Another villager asks whether the golems can help with chores, and Ginger replies that they can. In fact, he says almost anything is possible with them. Suddenly, the golem's eyes light up. Ginger is caught off guard and wonders if there's another source of mana nearby. At that moment, a villager shouts that someone is approaching the gate. A mysterious figure soon arrives. When the hood is removed, everyone realizes the visitor is an elf. With a bright smile, she introduces herself as Ulicia Weibwald, and shocks everyone by declaring that she has come to challenge the village leader to a duel. It's revealed that Ulicia is the daughter of the Queen of the White Forest. Kamiya isn't surprised. This confirms that he has met the conditions needed to recruit her. He steps forward and announces himself as the leader of the village. Ulicia tells Kamiya that if he loses, he must hand over leadership of the village to her. She confidently assures him that he has nothing to worry about, claiming she would develop the village properly. Kamiya smiles and asks what she's willing to stake if she loses. Ulicia insists she can't lose, but to be fair, she tells Kamiya he can ask anything of her if she does. When Kamiya asks if she'll truly honor that promise, she swears on her mother's name. Her confidence makes Leafy uneasy, but Kamiya remains calm and resolute as he prepares for the duel. The system informs him that he is about to duel with a mage. The villagers retreat behind the fence to avoid getting caught in the fight. Sylvian, who's casually drinking, asks who Ulicia is. Ginger explains that she's an elf from the White Forest clan, a reclusive group that rarely ventures into the outside world. Waldo laughs, commenting that this duel is basically a case of the strongest becomes the chief. Once everything is set, Kamiya tells Ulicia that the duel will begin when the coin he's about to throw hits the ground. He tosses it, and the instant it lands, Ulicia unleashes a wind attack. Kamiya narrowly dodges it. The villagers are left in shock, unable to even see what happened. Ginger explains that Ulicia used attack magic and that she's clearly very skilled. While the villagers worry that Kamiya might be overwhelmed, Ulicia is impressed that he's holding his own. Curious about his limits, she increases the speed and intensity of her attacks. Even so, Kamiya avoids every strike. Ulicia is what players would call a noob killer character. Her wind magic is devastating and hard to perceive, and anyone who fails to understand her attack patterns is guaranteed to lose, ruining their chance of recruiting her. However, Kamiya can read her movements just by watching how she swings her wand. One of her attacks finally heads straight toward him, but Kamiya blocks it with his shield. Ulicia is stunned. She's never seen anyone do that before. Her magic works well against flesh and blood monsters, but it can't penetrate an iron shield forged by Ginger. As Ulicia struggles to regain her composure, Kamiya closes the distance. Just before he can strike, she launches herself into the air using wind magic. The villagers stare in awe, wishing they could fly like her. While airborne, Ulicia begins preparing a high-level spell. Kamiya instantly realizes that if it hits him, it will be fatal. Even so, he keeps charging forward. Ulicia mocks him for running toward his own death, unaware that Kamiya is already setting a trap. When she finally releases the spell, it suddenly dissolves mid-air, leaving Ulicia frozen in shock. Before she can gather herself, Kamiya pulls Ulicia down with a sling. He drags her closer and points his sword at her, making it clear that she has lost. Kamiya explains that her high-level magic failed because the mana density in the area is too low, meaning the environment simply cannot sustain high-level spells. Since Ulicia is down and unable to move, Kamiya declares his victory. Ulicia admits defeat, but she's still confused and shocked that she lost to someone who doesn't even use magic. Kamiya then reminds her of the promise she made, and she nearly faints when she realizes she has to do whatever he asks. He orders her to clean up the aftermath of the battle since she broke everything. Leafy points out that having Eulesia, a mage, on their side is a huge bonus, and Kamiya agrees. With Eulesia around, Kamiya suggests testing out new tactics that very night. Later, Kamiya and the squad head into the forest. While traveling through the woods, Kamiya asks Leafy if she has any idea what's happening in the real world. Leafy replies that she can't see the real world from her position. The only thing she knows is that the game master has been replaced. Kamiya explains that this change is the reason parts of the game have started to go off course. Kamiya then tells Leafy that he's determined to reach level 100 as soon as possible. When Leafy asks why, he reveals that reaching level 100 will allow him to enter the tower. He explains that even though he's operating in developer mode, there are still limits to what he can do. He needs the power that lies within the tower. Suddenly, Eulesia stops him and asks how much longer they'll be walking. Kamiya replies that they'll keep moving until they find monsters. It turns out he plans to test Eulesia's magic alongside the golems in preparation for the night's battle. Kamiya asks Eulesia how much magic she can use, and she begins listing her abilities, including wind magic and other elements. However, Kamiya cuts in and asks how much magic she can actually use in this area. He calmly points out that she's limited to a few wind-based attack spells and some movement support abilities. Noticing his gaze, Eulesia admits that she's currently weak because the area only has low-grade mana stones. With high-grade stones, she could do far more. Kamiya reassures her that he isn't blaming her. He simply wants her to understand her limits so she doesn't repeat the mistake she made earlier. Ginger then asks if Kamiya plans to pair Eulesia with the golems. Kamiya confirms this, explaining that they don't have any other magic users in the village. By synchronizing the golems with magical firepower, their tactical options will expand. He suggests assigning Eulesia as the golem's master, so they can use magic just like her, even if it's weaker. Kamiya instructs Eulesia to inject her mana into the golems, so she can teach them her magic. She agrees and places her hand on a golem, releasing her mana into it. Once she's finished, Kamiya tells her that she can issue commands simply by visualizing them. Eulesia closes her eyes and casts a spell to leap into the air. When she opens them again, the golems are already floating alongside her. Seeing the first test succeed, Kamiya orders her to use the same tactic to eliminate the monster bunnies nearby. Eulesia happily accepts. She hates monsters to begin with. She launches a wind attack, and to her surprise, the golems follow suit, unleashing their own wind blasts. Enjoying herself, she adds even more flair, forcing the bunnies to flee. Even as they run, she wipes most of them out with powerful gusts. After the monsters are dealt with, Eulesia descends slowly and admits that the golems are incredibly useful. Kamiya reminds her that a golem's strength depends on its master, meaning she can't slack off on training. Slightly annoyed at being ordered around, she casually says she understands. Kamiya smiles, knowing they've just gained a major edge in battle. Meanwhile, in the real world, Onohara is completely losing his composure. Nothing is going according to his plans, and he's already considering taking a far more aggressive approach to the situation.